Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Good evening, fair listener. It's a very pleasant Tuesday evening, October 16th. The weather seems to have started to spring back a little bit. I have a warm jacket on, but no hat, no gloves, and the jacket's zipped down to my belly, which sounds more erotic than it is. Don't let yourself be excited, dear reader or dear listener. So this week's pre-planned episode is going to be a on the table episode in which I check in at the midpoint of the month and talk about what I've been playing and give you my impressions on the games in the beginning of the month. One game I played that actually I just did today was a Wits and Wagers game with my class. As I've mentioned a couple times, I'm teaching a big class of 90 people. And today we played a Wits and Wagers game that I was thinking would take about an hour and took closer to 2. It was a pretty fun game, but it ended up eating up more time than I intended. It was the midpoint of the semester though, so I let it go longer than it needed to and let it just be fun. I don't think I'll do that again, or if I do another game, it's going to be a bit more restrained in style. But overall, it was a good time, and I think the students had a fun, relaxing time of the class. So, good experience there. So checking in for my on the table this month, I have a number of games that I've played, and I'll just jump right into it. So I'm not going to talk about every game that I played, but definitely hit some of the highlights. Starting with The Mind. I went to an academic conference at the beginning of the month, and I brought a bunch of games with me. One of the games that got the most play was The Mind. If you haven't encountered this at all, it's a really weird game. The idea of The Mind is that you are trying to sort of make a psychic link with the other players so that you can play cards in order without ever speaking. It's pretty interesting, and I did with different groups get really good at it. We never got to round 7 or 8, but we got around 5 or 6 and had a pretty good time doing it. Looking forward to playing that some more. That's The Mind. A difficult game to find, but easy enough to pick up from a financial standpoint, only $15 or so. We also played Welcome To, which is a flip and write game that's getting a lot of buzz these days. It is really fun. I taught it badly, so we played it wrong the first game, which is kind of a bummer. But overall, it was a good time, and I'm looking forward to playing it again. But I haven't gotten it back to the table myself. At some point, I will have to look into getting a laminator and laminating a dozen or so of the sheets and getting some markers. But for now, we'll just use the pads and throw away the pages as we finish. It would be nice to see them come out with some alternate pads so that the neighborhood design gets changed. A couple other games I won't spend too much time on that we played at the event. We played a couple rounds of Two Rooms and a Boom. I really enjoy running big games of Two Rooms and a Boom at conferences, so I was excited to see that happen. We played a few rounds of Secret Hitler, which is a social deduction game that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and played several games of Skull, which is a very simple bluffing game in which you challenge other people to flip over a certain number of cards without revealing a skull, and you have to flip over some of your cards. If you take the bet, and basically you either succeed twice or you lose twice, and you're out. It reminds me a little bit of where you have to lose 4 times to be out, I guess, because you have a limited number of cards that you can play. Reminds me a little bit of Welcome to the Dungeon, which also has a kind of bluffing angle to it. So Skull it's a fun little game. Played a bunch of rounds of it because it's quick to play. The next game at that con, and the last game at the con that I'll mention that got a lot of play, was Werewords. I brought Werewords, actually Werewords Deluxe, with slightly nicer art. And I brought that, and it went over very well. We had a lot of fun playing it. If you're not familiar, Werewords is a social deduction game wrapped up in a puzzle where you're playing 20 questions. You're trying to find out the answer, the question of a secret word or phrase, and one person knows, the person giving the clue obviously knows the answer, but two other people know as well. There's a werewolf and a seer, both of whom know the answer. And the werewolf is trying to keep people from figuring out what the word is. And the seer is trying to help people figure out what the word is. And whichever group wins, the other person gets an opportunity to steal the win if they're correct. So the seer can steal the win from the werewolf. If the group fails to get the word, then the seer can try to pick out the werewolf. Or the whole group actually has to pick out the werewolf. Meanwhile, the werewolf can steal the win from the village if they're able to pick out the seer. So it's got a nice little back and forth that I think works really well. So that's Werewords. So those are the games that I played at my convention, or at my academic convention. There were, or my conference. There were lots of good conversations, and I played a couple other games as well, but those are the main ones that got interesting things done. I'm looking forward to next year. I ran a session there about using board games in class, and next year I'm going to try to cultivate more people to actually present things at the conference. So that'll be fun. So three other games I wanted to talk about, and two that I'll name check. The ones I'm going to name check are Innovation and Smile. If you're a regular listener, then you heard me talk about these two games on Monday. I did a Shooting from the Hip episode about these two games, so I won't go into them much more, except to say that I enjoyed them and they were on the table this month, hence their inclusion in this list. So I have three other games that I've played, one of which I played on Boardgame Arena, and that would be Dice Forge. Dice Forge is a pretty simple dice rolling game in which you're trying to score points through various means by building up an engine and balancing the production of victory points, gold, blue gems, and orange gems. And the way you do that is by rolling these dice that are customizable. So you roll dice to get resources, and then you spend the resources to either get points or to upgrade your dice by prying off the face and putting on new faces. So at the beginning of the game, you have your die rolls, I think, one blue gem, one orange gem, and between the two dice, a bunch of gold. One gold on each face, other than the red gem and the blue gem. And so as you're upgrading, you can change the one gold into a 3 gold, or the one blue gem into a 2 blue gem, or that sort of thing. And the idea is to swap out the gem faces and score points. The two things that make it interesting, one is that it plays really fast. You play 9 rounds, and so you have to move very quickly, and the game is all about sort of just drilling down and tactically using the resources you have to do as well as you can. And then the second part is that you get to roll on everyone's turn. So in a 2-player game, you're going to roll your dice twice per round. In a 1-player game, you're going to roll them once. Or in a 3 or 4-player game, you're going to roll them once per turn. But you're rolling your dice on every person's turn and increasing your resources as indicated by your dice, which is nice because then you have something to do every turn. It's fine. I'm glad I'm playing it on Boardgame Arena and not as a game I bought. I think it would be fun to play in person. Fixing the new faces on the dice would be fun, but honestly, it seems kind of finicky. On Boardgame Arena, it's super smooth and easy, so I'm happy to just play it there and be done with it. 2 more games to mention. One, my neighbor, with whom I have played Axis and Allies and Star Wars Rebellion a couple times. I've mentioned him before. When my wife and I went over there a couple weeks ago, we loaned them Pandemic, and he loaned us Carcassonne, which is weirdly one of those gateway games that I've never played. I always thought it sounded fun, looked good. I kind of know how it works. I mean, I've seen enough videos of it or read enough about it that I understand what you're supposed to do, but we never actually played it. So they loaned us Carcassonne and we gave it a try. We played 2 games of it, and that was enough for me to know it's not for me. I suspect that if you know what you're doing, it's not as bad as I thought. That said, my main experience, a little bit with the first game and a lot with the second, was one of frustration and irritation. Because a little bit in the first game and a lot in the second game, I would get into battles with my daughter over the city, and then I would have a turn or 2 turns where I don't draw any city tiles, and she's able to like close off the city or get the city and invalidate all my dudes, and there's nothing I can do about it. And for a Euro game, it's really frustrating to have luck play such a big role in what you can or can't do. That in Carcassonne, if you haven't played, in Carcassonne you draw a tile and you place it somewhere on the board. You have to respect the tiles, the other tiles that have been placed, but basically you can add to a city, you can build a monastery, you can build roads, you can put down farmers. There's a bunch of different things you can do, and all of them earn you points in various ways if you commit your little workers to that space. But you only have 7 workers, and if you leave too many of them on the board, then you run out of things and you actually can't do other things. The biggest points by far come from the cities, which can be added to by players trying to connect up the different elements. And it's just frustrating to get into a battle over a city, to find yourself dueling with somebody, and then if they win the city, you lose all your points. I guess it's possible that we weren't playing right. Maybe there's a rule I missed or something. But ultimately, it felt really... I got really bitter about it. And we have so many other games to play that this game that made me feel so bitter after only 2 plays. It's good enough for me. So, Carcassonne, nope. The last game that I got to play, I'm a little hesitant to reveal because it's one of my top of the stack games, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, is the Expanse board game. So the Expanse is a card-driven strategy game in the same vein as 1960, The Making of a President, or Twilight Struggle. These are games in which you're using cards to control or try to control different areas on the board. And the big element of it is that each card has different factions on it, and you can, if you choose to take a card and use it for its action points, and your opponent's symbol is on the card, then they get to use the card and do the thing that the card says. So you have this interesting push-pull where to get action points, you almost always have to activate one of your opponent's cards, or you have to sacrifice one of your own cards. But the action points are really necessary for doing things. Now, the Expanse is themed around the Expanse TV show. I haven't read the novels, but I enjoy the TV show. And it fits pretty well. It feels a lot like those other games. As far as I can tell, I haven't actually played Twilight Struggle or 1960, The Making of a President, although I do have the latter. But I haven't tried it yet. That said, I played a 2-player game of The Expanse with my daughter, and we both really enjoyed it. I like the tension of trying to decide when to take a card and what to use it for. The game went really fast, which is very fun. I like a deep strategy game that only takes 45 minutes, which is the playtime on The Expanse. So from that perspective, I really enjoyed it. and I think it's worth pursuing, or at least trying out if you like that kind of game. So that represents a rough summary of what's been on the table this month so far. What have you been playing out there in pick up and deliver land? What games are you trying out? What games are you returning to? What are you enjoying? Pop over to Boardgame Geek Guild 3269 and let us know which games are tickling your fancy. Or, if you have a chance, write us a review on one of the various places that podcasts show up, or tell a friend about the show. We've held steady at 12 members of the guild for quite a while now, so thank you, those of you who are in the guild and have been listening. But I'd love to introduce the show to a few more people. So if you have some friends you know would enjoy it, drop them a line and let them know Pick Up and Deliver is here for the listening. That's about it for me. Thanks for joining me on my walk on this pleasant Tuesday evening. Here's hoping your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.